Welcome back to ADHD Power Tools. I just would like to reintroduce myself. My name is Brooke Schnittman. And for those of you who have been watching ADHD Power Tools, you probably know who Ali and I are. But for those of you who are new to our channel, again, I'm Brooke Schnittman, the owner and founder of Coaching with Brooke, and an ADHD and executive function life coaching company for adults and students who are looking for the tools to live an empowered life. And I'm based out in South Florida, practice worldwide, and really excited to introduce Jeff today and Ali.
Yep. I'm Ali. You guys know me. I'm an intern at Different Brains, ADHD self-advocate. I was diagnosed with ADHD at 7 years old. And since then, I want to share my journey, help others with the tools I've collected along the way by co-hosting ADHD Power Tools, doing research on college students with ADHD. I'm also currently a student. I finished my bachelor's in biology at FAU, doing my second bachelor's right now. I'm working as an emergency medical technician. I'm aspiring to become a physician. Today, I'm super excited to have with us Jeff Copper, who's a trained, credentialed ADHD and life coach, ADHD coach, trainer, and speaker, host of Attention Talk Radio, and founder of Dig Coaching. Dig or DIG? Did I get it right?
It's DIG. The acronym stands for Damn, I'm Good, and backwards, it's Get It Done.
There you go. Well, welcome to ADHD Power Tools, Jeff.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I really appreciate the invitation.
Of course. You can go ahead and introduce yourself properly. Tell us who we are, what you do in the ADHD space.
I fashion myself as an attention coach. At the end of the day, I think when you're life coaching, you're actually coaching people's attention and what to pay attention to, et cetera. So that's really what I do. I specialize in coaching people with ADHD. And so with that, I'm all things attention. So I got Attention Talk Radio is my podcast, Attention Talk Videos is my YouTube channel. I speak on attention. Anyway, I'm basically all things attention, and I focus on helping adults diagnosed with ADHD to excel in life. People talk about niches and stuff, ADD, the process of it, the brain wiring is the same. So I've coached housewives to CEOs, to entrepreneurs, to singers and entertainers, et cetera. So it's all the same thing, but that's more or less what I've been doing. Love it.
There you go. That's awesome. And so today I want to start off with, it's 2022. It's a new year. We all want to, find some motivation, take on a new year. And, us with ADHD, sometimes, there's so many tabs open. So I want to ask you, how do you describe the relationship between clarity and motivation?
I'm really, really, really glad you asked that question. And I want to do a caveat. People with ADHD are going to struggle with motivation anytime you're dealing with a repetitive, boring, routine task. Those with ADD are more susceptible to something called agitated boredom, which is defined as the physical discomfort where you're motivated to escape the plight. Or it's put different, you're so uncomfortable, you're going to do anything to get comfortable. I was explaining this to a woman one time that didn't have ADD, and I said, "Well, you ever been cold?" And she said, "Yeah, so cold you did something you weren't supposed to do." She said, "Yeah, I was in Canada one time, it was 10 below, and I, broke into somebody's house to get warm." I'm like, "Yeah, okay, so that's what uncomfortable's like." So when you've got something that with ADHD you got to do that's incredibly boring, understand the way your brain is wired, it's going to be difficult anyway. And I'm not so sure you're going to find the motivation to overcome that. What I always recommend is, one, try to find a way not to do it. Number two, reduce the number of steps or pair it with something else that you can pay attention to. So for example, and I think I can speak with some authority, I was an internationally ranked swimmer in the 80s. And I used to swim 4 hours a day. I still swim, but I don't swim by myself because it's too boring. It's repetitive, boring exercise. I typically always do it with other people. So most people don't think of athletics as being a real social thing, but it really is when you think about it. So I combine the social side and the athletic side, I'm able to go forward. So that's things that are repetitive and boring related to that. Now, past that, and working with Dr. Russell Barkley's model and coaching, it's been interesting to me because I find that 80% of procrastination is rooted in ambiguity. There's two parts of that. One, you literally just don't know what to do. And the other part of it is, you got the parts, but you can't hold it all in your mind, which is working memory. And so people come to me often, they're like, I need to get the motivation. And I'm saying, oh, I know you want that. But one thing I've learned is there's a huge correlation between clarity and motivation. Get the clarity, and the motivation is a feeling that kind of goes along with that. So I'm really big into problem solving. and identifying what is the root cause. Because if you just say, I got to get the motivation, emotionally, you can wander all over the place and psych yourself up, and you might be able to do a real short sprint. But if you're not really clear on what's going to go on, it's not going to last. But if you focus on, I got to get that clarity, now you're getting at the root cause, and now you can kind of do something about it and say, listen, I got to find clarity. I got to search for clarity. Now, you're not actually doing what you want to accomplish yet. It's an interim step that you've got to do in order to get there. So as I say, there's a high correlation between clarity and motivation. So if you want motivation, as long as it's not word, focus on the clarity. But conversely, there's a huge relationship between uncertainty and avoidance. And so again, I often tell people, just focus in on how am I going to get clarity on what to do? And often if you can get the clarity, then the motivation will come.
That's huge. So many of us know, okay, you have to understand why you want to do something before you can do it, but getting clear before you find the motivation is huge. I also love the piece that you mentioned about the ambiguity as well, because as ADHDers, analysis paralysis is huge, but sometimes we just don't have enough information about what we want, what we need to get that clarity and understand our next step. So we get down on ourselves about that, but it's, we need more.
And I have a true story that I'd like to share that will kind of illuminate this, because often we have a narrative that we tell ourselves because we really don't get into it. But true story, whenever I'm working with somebody, I start with a 2-hour discovery call, and it's basically design the relation and get to know them. And often if nothing comes out of that call, the first exercise is come back with a list of things that you procrastinated on. So this gentleman comes back to me, calls in, and I said, okay, what's on your list? He said, I need to call my relatives to tell them about my daughter's dance recital. I said, okay, well, what's hard? Nothing. Seriously, what's hard? It's easy. It's just a phone call. Like seriously, like what's hard about this? He said, Jeff, I told you it's easy. I said, would you stop? Now, everybody's self-awareness is an executive functioning. I said, are you present right now? It's the first thing on your list, and you're paying me money. Like, right, you're paying me money. Quit telling me it's easy. What is hard? And he goes, I don't know. I guess when they call, they're going to ask me, what am I supposed to wear? Where do I park? And what do I bring? In that moment, and he realizes now he's got to go back to his wife. Can't you just do this one thing? You know, that whole emotional thing, to find it, to kind of go back. And in that moment, just illustrated how it wasn't easy. It was actually hard. He wasn't clear on the information that he needed to give them. But this is rooted in working memory, because when his wife asked the question of him to go do that, had he paused and thought, imagined, if you will, which is visual imagery, that he was on the receiving end of the call, he might have said, oh, these are the questions that I would naturally ask, get that information from his wife. But with people with ADHD, thinking inside their head is difficult, so they often escape it. So he heard it, didn't pause, didn't use his working memory to think about what he might have, went to go do the phone call, and then shamed himself because he wasn't doing it, because he wasn't clear on what the answers is. Now, this is a very simple thing, but it totally illustrates executive functioning as an impairment, the difficulty with thinking, the calling something easy when it's not, and the ambiguity that's getting in the way of making the call. Once we identified what that was and he became aware of it, he was able to ask the questions and then would use that in other calls in the future. Again, I just like sharing that because it's such a simple one, but when you think about it, a lot of people can kind of relate to it in one way, shape, at least in their behavior. Make sense?
Absolutely. It's almost like, doing the laundry. I know it's not the same, but people shame themselves for not being able to do the laundry, and then they forget how many steps are involved in it. So that might not be as much of a working memory piece, but there are multiple factors that your client needed to get it done.
But so, it's one thing is like laundry, a great example is working memory, part of it, right? If you go downstairs, you take the laundry, I mean, this is a classic, you put the laundry, the washing machine, right? And you go on and you don't do anything, and you don't recall that it's down there. So you go down 3 days later and it smells, and you got to do it again. That's actually working memory to retrieve that knowledge, to hold it, that you've got to go down and move it from one to the other. Then when you get it upstairs, the folding it part is a repetitive and boring part, where a lot of times, like,
No one
hey,
wants
if
to
you do it
fold
with
and put it away.
if you do it with the TV on, or you do it while you're on the cell phone on, now you're combining activities to make it, again, I just to use that silly thing to kind of reinforce what we're talking about.
Absolutely. That's huge. And the fact that he was shaming himself because he wasn't getting this easy thing done, and the emotions came into play. He was so frustrated. He was paying you to get coached, and then you allowed him to get clear and see it wasn't just about making that call and doing it. It was all the other factors of communicating with his wife.
And forgive me, because emotional regulation is an executive functioning too. So we lacked the self-awareness. There was a thinking impairment to stop and visualize what he needed. There was the emotional piece that came in at the end, right, of shaming and blaming, which, by the way, you can't treat ADHD the lens of shame and blame, but it's all wrapped up in that nice little thing. And so the idea really is if you can pause and focus on clarity. What's hard? What am I not clear about? Ask yourself those questions. Now you're in a position to get better chance of getting at the root cause of whatever the issue is and move forward.
Yeah, I love that. And I also think that it's, I don't know if I'm sure you've come to terms with this before, but when someone is so emotionally charged about something, it's so hard to unwrap that and make that decision. So I'm just like, come back in 24 hours and let's look at this again.
Absolutely. That's emotional self-regulation. I can describe the process. It's the easiest thing for me to describe. It's the most difficult for somebody with ADHD to execute.
Absolutely.
I want to say a little something about this. I like how you guys talk about the easy tasks a lot, but then there's the harder tasks, more difficult tasks, right? Like trying to create that workout routine, or studying for that cumulative exam. I'm a college student. There's these difficult tasks that you try to get out the way. And clarity and motivation, I really like how you talk about, you want to find that clarity to become motivated to finish that task. I think with clarity, you want to ask yourself some questions like you guys brought up. What am I trying to achieve? What's my goal? What do I want to achieve out of this? And then you want to ask yourself, who are you doing it for? Are you doing it for yourself? Are you doing it for others? And then you want to ask, do I know how to do this task? You want to mind map, write down, what's the structure? How am I going to approach it? And then you might find the motivation, the clarity, and pair it with things like friends. You brought up, you want to pair your task with something. Accountability, friends are great. Listen to music, maybe something, a little fidget spinner, those little small things that can help you take on your tasks and find that motivation. Just increase that dopamine while you take on that task or that.
If everybody will listen, all he was saying, he's actually problem solving. You're pausing and you're thinking through what the issues are at hand in order to do that. All too often, people with ADHD, they actually don't problem solve. They escape that. But my success, anybody with ADHD, it's all about problem solving. Everybody's going to cringe, but none of us liked word problems when we were in school. And if you think about it, we learned to solve for equations, but word problems were different. You had to read a narrative and identify relevant and irrelevant information, take the relevant variables and organize them in a way that you could actually solve the problem. In other words, you had to derive the equation.
Absolutely.
And often with people with ADHD, they're like, give me the equation. Well, I can give you equation, but it may or may not address the relevant variable. So we hate the word problems, but that's basically how it's solved. And Ali, if you go back and listen to what he did, he was just basically looking at the relevant and irrelevant variables, trying to figure out how to solve that particular problem. Again, this is wrapped around clarity. I got to think through and get clarity, what will work for me. So it's, again, I had to take that opportunity because you just demonstrated it talking out loud.
Yeah, that's huge with the word problems. As you mentioned, it reminds me of this situation where if he wrote down his story and everything he's thinking and all of his fear, then he can pull out the facts from it. Just like in a word problem, you could pull out the equation.
100%.
We hope you liked today's video. If you want more information about ADHD, please feel free to visit our website at differentbrains.org or my website, coachingwithbrooke.com.
And if you enjoyed today's video, give us a thumbs up, leave a comment below, and subscribe.